Well, 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 Hammer Abbey, as I live and breathe. Hello, I am now the AFTDA board. Oh, I've gone power mad. Um, so yeah, I'm sitting in for Mary Chaos here, Ham. I've been instructed with getting you your screen share access. Oh, I see you now.
Yeah, can you hear me too?
Yes, I can.
That's really annoying. So I have a setup where I have my laptop over here and then I have a external monitor and I have this very nice webcam mounted on it and it's been working fine in every other Zoom meeting I've been in and now it just doesn't want to work.
Oh,
so we're gonna
no.
just use the onboard camera and that'll be fine because I'm gonna have my notes up on one and then this on the other. So
Okay.
one way or the other it'll work. I'm just sort of like, really now? It's nice to hear your glorious voice and see your glorious beard, by the way.
Thanks. Likewise, minus the beard.
Well,
I'm like I like that you've even though it's still it's in need of trimming. Your coif is still magnificent.
Oh God, it's like several inches higher than normal. The big problem I'm having is with all this, but
yeah,
we just got a clippers today.
Right on.
So we're gonna experiment and see how that goes.
Yeah, I am in need of I need to clean this up a little bit. It's getting a little unruly. Still can kind of keep it in control, but
Okay. Is that a Zoom background you've got going?
yes, it is. Well, I mean,
Excellent.
I found it online, so
No.
it's not from Zoom specifically. But no, there's not wood paneling behind me,
I
unfortunately.
was gonna say, I'm like, you're in a beautiful room.
No, there's a cat box behind me actually. So the the screen is kind of it's for all y'all.
Nice. I feel like I need to find like a Derby specific one, but for right now, you're going to get the Derby seal.
I've I want to find like just the right picture of like the dais from one of our home games. And use
Oh yeah, that would be good. But
that.
alas, I
Yeah.
think what I'm going to do is just use the generic image that I've got in my actual presentation because it's nice and clean. Hold on a second here. Yeah, and it looks like I have access to screen share, and I'm going to do that in a minute just to make sure it works.
Cool. Yep. Yeah, because it looks like I took a look at the settings, and it looks like so long as the host, me, is not sharing, then anybody should be able to jump in and share. So
we just have to hope that no one else tries to jump in and share who shouldn't.
Right. Well, like worst case scenario, somebody does that, I steal it away from them, and then like I can like make you the host, and then you can just take it from there, and then we don't have to worry about it. But
cool. I was going to say, do you need to smack anybody down for me?
Yeah, I trust you, Derbyverse. Anybody who has who's going to be coming to this is above board, right? Right.
Yeah, I hope so. Right? You think? All right. So I've got my notes up. Got this up. I'm curious to see like who, if anyone, joins.
Yeah. I mean, like
a weird specific thing, So.
Yeah, no, I was really excited when they when I saw the post that that you were going to be doing this. Like, oh hell yeah! Well, like I was going to be here one way or the other, and then I saw Chaos be like, "Hey, I need somebody to sit in real quick," and
Well, that worked out well.
Yeah. So yeah, I was like, yeah, cool. I use Zoom every day at work, so.
Are you seeing my Acing your
Yes.
post-game interview thing? Okay.
Yep. I see the whole browser. So if you're looking to share just the
Well, yeah, I have to go into
like yeah, once you start it'll
that
full
mode.
screen. Yep, perfect.
Okay. And let me make sure this is all working like it should. Yes, indeed. So this is, have you ever used Prezi before?
No, I haven't.
So if you ever have to do one of these, you know, the PowerPoint is fine. It's fine. And you can like get really fancy with it these days. Prezi is like way easier to use, way more user friendly, and it's just automatically got much more dynamic
Hmm,
like function, as you see,
nice.
transitions and stuff. Yeah, I'm a huge fan, and it's free
Cool.
online. You can sign up for an account and get
So
like
so
fancier
is it
qualities, but
Prezz or like
it's
how's it spelled?
P. Testing me now. I think it's Prezi, or wait, hold on. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
Prezi.com,
All
and
right.
it's like the basic, and you can do a lot with the basic is totally free. It's just web. It's a web browser based thing,
Oh, nice.
and you don't have to like sign up for some shit. So, well, pay for some shit, I should say.
Yeah, I like it. Neat. I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah, just my little tip. One of my coworkers put me on it, and I was like, "Oh, this is really
Cool.
nice. I like
Cool.
this a lot better than the PowerPoint. Just a little more interesting. People have seen a million PowerPoints at this point."
Yeah.
Cool. So, anything else that we should go over or that I should know?
I don't think so. It automatically started recording as soon as I entered and turned off the waiting room.
Oh,
So
so
yeah,
all of
so
this is recorded.
yes, so that which I feel is important. Uh um no, I'm sure like whenever they like post things, they'll clip all of this. Um so I wasn't asked to introduce you or anything like that. I would be happy to if you'd like an introduction.
I think
Um
Bobby said he was going to do the intro
oh, okay, cool.
in an email. So, as long as he shows up, and if not,
Awesome.
you can just tag in.
Yeah, like I have no idea what's happening. Like I am just sitting here being the AFTDA board,
Okay.
uh, and then,
That's a
which
big responsibility.
yeah, I'm a little disappointed. Like I may have to go in and change it from board to bod because I was going to do this whole kneel before bod thing, but
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And
uh,
then you can make just like hot bod and dad bod
yeah,
jokes galore.
like really, and like, and what's the point of going power hungry if you're not going to like give yourself goofy names?
Precisely. So how are you holding up these days?
Doing all right. I am amongst the very fortunate where like I can work remotely.
Same.
So I'm not like affected financially so much. I find myself working more than I used to because my workstation is now also where I normally do all of my fun, relaxing stuff. So there's that
Isn't it
going.
weird how that works out?
Yeah. It's like it's so hard to resist. Like I've found so many times, I'm like sitting here like, oh, just like one more thing. All right, well, it's probably about time to stop. Oh God, it's 7:30. Like, so all right.
Yeah.
Um,
You got to set better boundaries for yourself, man.
yeah, I'm trying to trying to set like reminders. Just be like, hey, it's 5:30. You should be winding down now.
Yeah. No, that's
Um,
good. I think that's an important part of working from home.
yeah, definitely. But otherwise, like keeping it up, like need to get out more, especially now that the weather's turning nice.
Actually, you got tomorrow, and then it gets shitty until like Tuesday.
Oh, seriously? Shit.
Yeah. So here's a sick joke. There's literally a polar vortex coming in.
Really?
Because you can barely get those in the spring. And it just means that things are going to be like freezing temperatures overnight, and then like in the 40s during the day
Uh,
for like a few days.
well, maybe it'll kill all the murder hornets.
No, the honeybees do that with their hot bee balls.
I haven't seen that one yet.
There's apparently a certain kind of honeybee in Japan that's evolved a defensive mechanism where they all
Oh.
dogpile the murder hornet and they raise their body temperature and they
Yeah.
literally cook it.
Okay. Yes. All right. I have seen that. I didn't know that was specific to murder hornets. Oh, that's cool.
I don't know if it's specific to them, but it definitely seems to work on them. So.
Nice. So, how about yourself? How's the quarantine treating you?
Yeah, I feel incredibly privileged mostly, which is like a weird almost survivor's guilt sometimes because I have a lot of people around me who working essential jobs that
Mhm.
are paying them shit and treating them like shit.
Yeah.
And they don't really have a choice. But like, I get to work from home. My nonprofit's in a pretty damn good position. They're treating us
Mhm.
really well, being very transparent, communicative. I live right next to a little woodsy area and a bike path, so like I can get outside without it being dangerous, and it's fine. And I live with 2 people and a dog, so
Yeah. Nice.
like it's hard and there's ups and downs and like anybody, but yeah, I think
Mhm.
in the grand scheme of things, it feels weird and disconnected
Yeah.
sometimes.
It's getting kind of surreal to like acknowledge that real life used to happen.
Yeah,
Starting to feel like starting just like I don't know.
it's a dream. It's all a dream.
Yes. Like around this even I was like, did I do that roller derby thing once upon a dream way back when?
Hey,
That's
Bobby.
right. We went to Canada together. Hey, Bobby.
We used to travel the globe.
How do am I invisible? There we
You
are.
are. Your quarantine beard is glorious, sir.
Yeah.
Trying to jerry rig my phone so that I can see you all. There we go.
Excellent.
Good enough.
Yeah, that works. It's a nice angle. You can see your lovely shelves.
There you go. And I'm blocking the mess that's immediately behind me.
Perfect.
Yeah, no, I get that. Hence the green screen.
Yeah, Rich, I was thinking actually, because I reached out to a couple people for stuff in this presentation, and I was like, man, I'm not going to get to like hang out with any of my announcer friends like all year.
Mhm.
And I was like, we should just organize a like free-for-all shit show Zoom call at some point with a bunch of announcers.
There have been a couple of those around.
Play a game or something.
Yeah, I know that
It's
like
been a while. There was one like maybe a week in.
yeah, I saw that Loose Change put one together at some point, didn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't make that one, but
I missed it entirely. I like in the first couple of weeks, it was really hard for me to commit to doing much of anything.
yeah.
Like it's just like, oh. Plus I'm on Zoom all goddamn day for work. So, but I miss all your weird faces. So I think maybe it's time.
Bushier and bushier.
I hear
I
you.
don't know what you're talking about.
Mine's just on top of my head.
Yeah, I was lucky like
Right. So are you going to be handling the technical aspects for us?
I believe
Rich?
so. I was asked to show up to start the room and to give Ham the access that she needs.
Excellent.
I'm happy.
I don't know how to do that part.
All of that should now be done. We're recording, so if you have anything horrible to say it now before people show up, and we can clip it.
No, I assumed we were recording from the minute I came on, so I'm
Excellent.
all set to go.
Smart.
Although, this
Yeah,
is for
we
the
did.
record, iced tea.
Mhm.
This is iced tea.
Oh, I am fully drinking booze a hole right now.
Oh yeah, no, I figured I needed to channel chaos at least to some degree, so I'm going with wine myself.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, to be fair, this is a very light booze, but I also have water. But you know what? We're at home. We can do what we want.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
not actually on the mic.
I believe it. Right, correct.
Yeah, so basically, if there's any additional support that you need from my end on a technical aspect or anything else, I'm happy to do it. Otherwise, I will just be sitting back and enjoying the presentation.
Yeah, I'm going to mute my microphone. I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro. Is there some way one of you guys can keep track of like when we have a good number of people on? We might want to start, not get the intro out until like 8:05, whatever, depending on how many people are watching.
Yeah, no, I'll keep an eye.
Yeah.
Right now, it's the three of us plus one.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I figured we wait about 5 minutes for people to straggle in, and then tell people to mute their mics and get rolling.
And I probably,
I'm just going to keep eating my dinner in the meantime.
Totally fine.
I have the ability to mute everybody. So if that gets troublesome, then I will do that. In fact, and then I can even disallow participants from unmuting themselves. So if it, so I'll likely, well, I don't know how you guys normally run these. But yeah, if things get loud, I'll mute everybody, and then Ham, you'll be the first I unmute, unless
You,
Bobby has something going
you
on.
should also be able to just individually mute people in their boxes. There's like up in the right-hand corner of the individual box, there should be options, I think.
Ah, yes, there are. That is only
If
for
you
if there
don't-
is a
you don't
video.
need to
Raising
take
my
drastic
hand
measures.
instead of using the hand raise function. The way
Sorry,
Chaos
Bobby.
has been doing it previously is muting everybody and then unmuting it at points and asking for questions.
All
When you
right.
get to the end of a section of your outline before you move on to the next thing. So I'm ready to move on to the next part of my outline. Any questions about what I've gone over so far? You unmute everybody,
All right.
and then once you kill those questions, then you go back to muting everybody and move on with your outline.
Okay, cool.
Kill them dead.
Well, I have found my relevant buttons, so I will keep an eye on. So we've got more people trickling in. It's wonderful. But yeah, once you all are ready to start, let me know. I will mute everybody, unmute the two of you, and then we'll go from there.
Why don't you just say something simple like, let's get it started, Bobby, and then I'll introduce you, Hammer.
Sounds great.
Okay. Yeah. So for anybody who's already on the call, thanks for listening to us just jibber jabber. We're going to give it a few more minutes and then we will get going. Hello, Killjoy.
Hi, buddy.
Oh, I should change my actual screen name to be me.
I'm staying the AFTDA board. I don't care.
Yeah,
No,
you
that's
should.
good.
You should absolutely.
I'm going to strangle the heck out of this power while I have it.
If you're just tuning in, thank you. This is the third in the Association of Flat Track Derby Announcers webinars. The first was back in November of 2019. That was by me about production. And then the AFTDA president, Mary Chaos, did one about avoiding stress. And that was in January of this year. And now this is the third in our lecture series. Coming up just shortly, keep your ears on. Hammer Abby's going to be taking us through how to ace your post-game interview. Are we good? Are we waiting for more people to join?
Oh,
Yeah, a couple more minutes.
Yeah, you're
okay.
We've got
Not everybody's always
grand total of 6, including all the now 7. Figure every time I make a count of how many people are out there, we get one more.
It said 42 on Facebook. It said that 42 people were interested or going.
Yeah, that's Facebook though. It's probably going to be like, you get like 10% of that.
Previous webinars were about 6 or 7.
Filling up.
Oh, there we go.
See ya.
Hey, what's the word, guys?
Well, hello. Seems to be complicated for me to change my name on here, so whatever.
There's going to be construction in my upstairs apartment. It's been going on all day. I was hoping they'd be done.
I can rename you Ham.
Rename me.
You could do it yourself. I was able to, I think.
Yeah, I feel like I'm screen sharing right now, and it wanted to like flip over to that, and I feel like it might be easy, but I'm just like, ugh.
You wanted as much profanity in your name as possible, right, Ham?
Yes, please.
Okay, cool.
Somebody has a professional grade microphone.
I don't know who that is.
I think that's just Rich's professional grade voice.
Yeah, no, this is like it's like a boom mic. I use this every day for work, but I do have a nicer mic that I use to actually record things with.
No, I was like,
I see.
Let me find my nicer mic. Speaking of, while we're waiting.
Good to see you, Rich. By the way, it's been a minute.
Yeah, likewise, man. How have you been?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have my fancy mic, but these will probably be a little bit better than ambient. Good friend, or team, Science Friday, and is on frequent Zoom calls with one of their beautifully voiced hosts who has a professional grade microphone at home and is always like mad about it, but like I love it so much. Much more pleasant than most Zoom calls.
Yeah, I was on one earlier today where I swear there was somebody who was in a wind tunnel and they were incapable of muting their microphone. The great thing is they didn't have a lot to say in the meeting. So it was just the entire time.
Yep. Been on that call as well. That's the people who call in on their phone and don't don't look to be like, hey, I can mute this.
My days are all Zoom calls with 95-year-old, well, 94-year-old women and some men in the 90s too, because church stuff, and I mute the heck out of them. I mean, I'm muting old ladies, like it's literally my job, and I have no mercy whatsoever, like because they're always doing something in the background, mute, all day, every day.
Yep.
Good policy.
Yep. Fully support that.
The problem is if I ever get back to real in-person church and I can't mute people, I'm going to be pissed.
That's going to be
Which
like
I tell them every Sunday.
Yeah, that'll be a hard readjustment. My father is a retired minister, and he is married to a current minister. He gets to do what's called pulpit supply, which is like living the dream, right? Yeah, you just do the fun part and none of the like managing a congregation. But yeah, they've been learning how to do YouTube videos of services, which I'm very proud of him because he's like 73, just like figuring out new stuff. They're doing great. But yeah, he's like, it sucks not to have an actual like congregation and interact with people, but there are some benefits. Yep. You know what I'm talking about. All right. Well, we've been shooting the shit probably long enough. I think we can probably get rolling if you would like to kick us off.
Okay, let's do that. If you're just tuning in, as I said briefly previously, this is the third in the webinar series put together by the Association of Flat Track Derby Announcers. I got upstairs construction going on, so I'm going to mute myself as soon as possible, but I did want to introduce you to tonight's presenter, which is the inimitable Hammer Abby, announcing since 2014, skating since 2014, withdrawn, skating since 2012 and announcing since 2014, making her debut at the Midwest Brew Ha Ha when Val Capone put her on the mic for 11 games over the course of a weekend. There's a baptism by fire. Worked her way up. She's called local rec league games, home team games, then all the way to the WFTDA championships and the Roller Derby World Cup. You've probably seen her at the last several post-season WFTDA postseason tournaments as a specialist in post-game interviews. She's really an ace at it. You've seen her play acting with Smarty Pants. You've seen her encourage Peacewar to sing Selena. And you've stood by deeply amused for K Wood's slogan coinage of Cornfed Midwest Sticky Derby, among other greatest hits. You might also recognize her from podcasts such as SS Roller Derby, which she co-hosts with fellow skater and announcer Allie Gator when they get around to it. And we are pleased to have number 141 on the Madison Roller Derby quad stars here taking us through how to ace your post-game interview. Somebody mute me and take it away, Hammer Abby.
Thank you so much, Bobby. It's the Quad Squad, but you were so close. So close. Yep. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to yet another Zoom call in this strange world that we live in now. I'm really grateful to the AFTDA for reaching out to ask me to do this. There are a lot of really wonderful, talented, experienced sideline reporter, interviewer types in roller derby. I am certainly not the only one. I'm happy to do this and to bring the knowledge that I have learned from many of those other fine people and from other aspects of my life to hopefully share in a useful way with all of you. And we can also have some discussion about that, and it'll be nice because no roller derby is happening, so we can just use our imaginations and pretend that roller derby is happening and talk about it now. So can everybody just give me a thumbs up? Can you see the current screen share of the microphone with the title card, all that good stuff? Looks good? Okay. I made a lovely presentation that we're gonna go through. So we will get rolling as soon as I have double monitors. Here we go. Okay. So here's what we're gonna talk about today. Overview. We're going to just do a little bit of introduction so you get to know who I am and why you should listen to me about anything at all to do with this. So I'll give you some background on me. We're going to talk about pre-game, like even before you get to a tournament, preparation that you can do to really nail these interviews. We'll talk about the actual prep for specific interviews once you're there. Talk about best practices for once you're going live, doing the interview. We'll do a little debrief. There'll be some fun clips of some example interviews, and we'll talk about like some good stuff in them and maybe some stuff that could be improved. Just in my videos, I've got a guest video as well. We're not going to critique her. And then we'll do some Q&A. But I will pause at the end of each one of these sections, and Rich, our tech man, will unmute everybody. So at that point, like if you don't have anything to say, just be aware that you are unmuted for a moment. And then if you do have a question, please absolutely, that's the time to speak up and ask. And if there's something that you feel like, hey, this was a thing that happened for me and it was really great and I'd love to share it, I'm totally open to statements as well. However, I'm going to warn you against if you turn into that guy at the Q&A after the thing who's like, really more of a statement than a question, and then you go on for an hour, I will digitally slap you. So don't do that. But please, absolutely, I'm not the only authority on this, so we can share with each other as well. And I was so happy they chose this screen grab of me with Scald Eagle, who is a very easy interview. That's like a gimme interview. Scald Eagle knows what she's doing. Can't even take credit when you do those interviews. She's great. All right, so a little bit about me. This is my professional headshot when my hair was a lot nicer cut. As Bobby mentioned, I started with Madison Roller Derby in 2012 with the Rec League, and I've been skating since then. But I've been a roller derby fan since about 2006, when I used to crowd into our local skate rink and sit on top of lockers and violate fire codes to watch roller derby happening. And was also a photographer, sort of amateur photographer for a long time at games. But started skating seriously in 2012, got drafted to one of our home teams in 2013. And because I was already friends with Allie Gator, and she was like, hey, you have a theater background and you have a radio background. Would you be interested in announcing? And I was like, would I? So she brought me to Brew Ha Ha in Milwaukee in 2014 and introduced me to the one and only Val Capone, who was shorthanded and said, if Allie trusts you, I'm going to throw you in. And yeah, I think I nearly lost my voice, but got through the weekend. And I think it was about 11 games over 3 days. Trial by fire, asked a lot of questions, made a lot of mistakes, and learned a ton, but also learned that I really loved the game of announcing as it was. I was encouraged to throw my name in the hat to apply to the WFTDA postseason in 2015, even though I was like, hey, I'm really new, this is weird. This was around the time that people like Sparkle Princess Steffi, was taking over as talent management for WFTDA, and she was really encouraging a diversification of the talent pool to announce these things, and was a wonderful mentor and champion, along with Double H and Mr. Whistler and a bunch of other really great people. And I ended up getting 2 playoffs that year in Dallas and Tucson, which was a lot of travel, and then went on to also help out at Champs that year, which 2015, oh God, my memory is terrible. I think that first one was Minneapolis, St. Paul, I want to say. I was at that one anyway. I got to see the game. I wasn't announcing it, but I got to see the game in person, the Gotham Rose game where Rose finally unseated them. It was pretty amazing. So anyway, so I was really fortunate to fall in with a lot of the announcers who were working at that level. I learned a lot about, I did a lot of some house calls, and I did some broadcast, not at Champs, but at playoffs. And then over a couple of years of doing that, they were like, hey, we want to throw you on this new thing we're working on called the sports desk / party desk, where we were doing just stuff on Facebook, like we were sitting at a desk and interviewing skaters, talking about fun color commentary between games. Hadn't done it before. I was working with Marone, Andrew Marone from Ohio, and it was just him and I kind of thrown to the wolves, figure it out. And we kind of made it work, and it's built since then. And for whatever reason, when I started doing that, I forget who initially asked me or assigned me, who was tournament head announcer, but they're like, would you be interested in doing post-game interviews? And I had 0 experience with post-game interviews before getting asked to do that. at, I believe, at championships. I think it wasn't even a playoff was the first one. They were just like, hey, go do that. And I was like, sure. So I will say, like, you know, it does help that I have a background being on stage and being on microphones. So not to say that no one can learn this on their own without that background, but I do want to just say, like, I have a leg up because of that practice. I know how to be on camera, and I know how to use a microphone, and that technique is an important part of it. So all that said, I had to really study up on, like, what is a good post-game interview? How do you do it? And I learned from a lot of other really wonderful people who had been doing it for a while. And I also fully relied on skaters that I knew for a little while. So, like, already had some friendship with them, or some acquaintance. And I was like, hey, you and I are going to talk for the first couple ones because I don't know what I'm doing. So anyway, so that's me. I also did Roller Derby World Cup in 2018 in Manchester, which was phenomenal. But we'll zoom back out. I don't think I need to take questions about my background. If you have randomly something about that in the future, you put your hand down, Rich. Feel free to ask it at another time, but I want to keep us cruising along and make it less about, like, my fabulous history here. So I got into a little bit of what we're going to talk about just in my intro, but preparation is key, right? So I am definitely a person who's prone to waiting to the last minute and winging things in a lot of parts of my life. And this was something where I knew I couldn't get away with that because, you know, a lot of people are watching this, and I want to make the people who are being interviewed look good and feel comfortable. And I wanted to put useful information into the world. And I'd also seen, let's just say, some less than great post-game interviews, and I didn't want to do that. So preparation is really important. And when I say, like, so the list here, obviously, do your homework. And that just means know what tournament or game you're walking into. Get some background, use those sports information books that are so lovingly compiled and crafted by various people. But also, like, you know, it just helps to be a fan of the sport. Follow the trajectory of teams over the course of the preseason and be at least vaguely aware of what's going on in that season, right? So it's a matter of, like, actually watching games, talking to skaters and coaches, talking to fellow announcers, shooting the shit about stuff and just getting people's take, because I've also learned a lot just in those beginning of the day tournament meetings with announcers where people are just talking about, like, what are you seeing? How are you feeling about that? What's your prediction for this? All of that information you should just absorb as much as possible and, you know, read up and kind of just try to identify trends, identify sort of standout things, and bring that with you into any tournament or game setting. If you are actually calling the game that you're about to also do an interview on, or if you are not calling the game, you should watch the game. So if you're on the mic, I know I often get, like, the announcer equivalent of jamnesia when I'm actually calling a game, where it makes it sort of difficult to remember what I just saw once I get done with the game, because I'm so in the moment. So take notes. If something really strikes you, or, like, a producer gives you something that's really great, that's like a trend or something, save that stuff. Take notes for yourself as much as possible with an eye toward what are those big standout moments in the game, what are the trends, and then all else fails, you can ask the producer who's been watching it the whole time with that eye for any input. And I do this a lot. I'll walk up to a producer, like, at halftime of the game, like, what are you noticing? Is there anybody that really stands out to you? Because sometimes I'm just sort of fried, or I just am not creative and I don't have any ideas of my own. So phoning a friend is always an option. And if you're not calling the game, obviously, like, you should sit and watch that game. You know, I can't watch every single game at a tournament when I'm working it. That's exhausting, but I should watch the game that I'm about to interview someone from. Should go without saying, but I'm going to say it. Always a good idea, too, to then, once you get there, check in with the team benches before the game, if at all possible, and just talk to the bench coaches and introduce yourself. Like, who are you? What are you doing? Let them know that you're going to be coming up to them as soon as the game is done and asking for a skater for a post-game interview, and that you need them, you know, as soon as the good game line is done, before they wander off to hang out with friends and stuff like that. It used to be the case where they would just have us go directly up to skaters and ask them. That was terrifying and terrible, and I didn't like it at all. So I'm really glad that the standard practice now is just talk to the bench coach, and then after the game, you go up to that bench coach again and you say, hey, can I talk to so-and-so? And they'll be like, yep. And you say, send them over here. This is where I'll be with the camera. Fun fact, actually have an enormous amount of social anxiety around approaching people cold to ask them for things like this. Although I like to think I fake it really well on TV and in person and being very extroverted, that shit terrifies me. So using the bench coaches is really nice because it's a little more low key. You can kind of establish that relationship beforehand. It makes it a lot more approachable. If there's a skater that you're like, I don't know that person at all, I don't know how they're going to react to this, they will react much more nicely to their bench coach telling them to go do something than a random announcer coming up to them. So it works out pretty darn well. And then you may all already know this, but this is sort of a fun fact that blows people's minds a lot, is that I have never been told who to pick for an interview. No one from the WFTDA has ever said, you need to talk to so-and-so. No one has ever forced me to change something. It's literally, if you are a sideline reporter doing interviews, you are completely on your own, free to make your own decision about who you think should get interviewed. So it's both great freedom and great responsibility, but it really means that you are free to get creative. And what I try to do with this is think about, what does an audience really want to hear about? And then balance that with, I'm not always going to interview a jammer or someone who's the obvious star, although sometimes those totally make sense to talk to. But you need to talk to blockers, you need to talk to pivots. Sometimes I talk to bench coaches on camera, and those have been really great interviews as well. You got to find where the story is and follow that. And you can also, you can grab the game MVP if all else fails. I call it getting poly-interviewist here because I'm terrible. But I've done interviews with 2 or 3 people, sometimes a huge group, which is a hot mess, but can be really fun if you do it right, if it's the right moment. But yeah, if someone is really nervous on camera, like a skater is really unsure about doing it by themselves, you can tell them to bring a friend who's experienced with it. There's some extra work you have to do to help that interview along that we'll get to in a minute when it's like that, if someone's really shy. But it's a great way for someone to get their feet wet who isn't used to being interviewed. If they're a little hesitant about it, to be like, is there someone on your team that you trust who's good at this who would come on with you? And we'll talk to both of you, no problem. This is also really useful when you are dealing with a team where their first language is not your first language and they maybe have a bit of a language barrier. Tell them to bring one of their teammates who's really fluent to make them feel more comfortable. And so they can speak what they can speak. And if they need to speak in their own language, which is completely understandable, then that person can offer to translate as well. And that's, you might have to do a little bit more work with them beforehand to get that set up. But I would rather give the opportunity for people who are non-English speakers to get interviewed than just ignore them or just assume that that's too hard and difficult to do. I think that's a really important part of our sport. I think we know most of the growth is happening in non-English speaking places. So we want to do what we can to be as inclusive as possible. Let's see, did I miss anything I wanted to talk about in this section? Yeah, so be ready with a backup option too. If you've got someone in mind that you want to interview, always have a back pocket person as well, because once in a blue moon, you just get the case where the bench coach says, you know what, that person doesn't do interviews. There's no arguing with that. It kind of sucks and it feels weird, but there's no use being like, come on. So you just like, all right, well, what about so-and-so? So be ready with a second name if for any reason that first person isn't going to work out. It's also like, I may make a decision halfway through a game who I think I'm gonna wanna ask to talk about, and then that might change the last minute based on like what happens in the second half of the game, or even like the very end of the game, or maybe someone gets injured, you never know. So definitely have a couple people in mind and kind of tier them. And then, yeah, okay, so, and the other thing I wanted to say before getting ready, I don't think it's in the next section. Let me check. I will stop for questions in a minute here too. Apologize. Yes, okay. I'm going to save it for this section, for the interview prep section. So before I go into this bit here, are there any questions or comments about the giant wall of words I just threw at you? Nate, everybody is still muted.
Yes, well, so rather than going ahead and unmuting everybody, I've restored your ability to unmute yourselves.
Ooh.
So if you would like to ask a question, now is the time.
And I'll give it like 10 seconds of dead air, and then if nothing, totally okay, and I'll move on.
At which point I will revoke all of your rights to unmute yourselves again.
So I'm wondering if in a tournament setting, you can, sometimes we keep a list, like we do this at Battle of the All-Stars, where we keep track of who's been interviewed because we do a post-game interview after every game. So I'm wondering if there's a way to, kind of work with that kind of structure.
You mean just like keeping track of who all's been interviewed and sharing that with, yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, that's obviously, well, not obviously, that's not the word I wanted to use. That's something that you should do. And so that's where it's important. Usually at a tournament, you've only got a handful, like a smaller group of people who are doing all the sideline interviews. I haven't been to one where they like spread it out over everybody. Cause like usually folks are like, we're focused on broadcast, we're focused on house, whatever it is. And then there's like 2 or 3 people doing sideline. So we become our own little entity and we talk to each other so that even if I can't watch all of those interviews live as they happen, which it's hard at a tournament sometimes, I always check in with everybody to be like, who did you talk to? How did it go? Any notes, anything interesting come up? Should I go back and watch it right now? Can it wait till later? And yeah, keep that running list because you don't want to interview the same person twice in a tournament. And that's a good point to note when you're deciding. If someone's already been talked to, oh, Katie, hi. You don't want to double up. And that's also a good point. One of the things I forgot to mention is, think strategically about who you choose, where like early in a tournament, you don't necessarily want to talk to one of the biggest stars in Derby who is almost for sure going to be in the final game. And maybe you're going to interview them at that point. And also maybe they get interviewed all the time. So like, don't start with a Scald Eagle, maybe, unless something really extraordinary happens. So yeah, that's a good note, Bobby. And then Rev, I think you had gone off mute. Do you have a question too, or comment? No, you good? All right. Anybody else? Cool. All right. So interview prep itself. What to expect when you're expected to do a post-game interview. So I always like to, one of the first things I think about is having kind of a stable of standard questions that I can always pull out of my back pocket. If my mind goes blank for stuff in the moment, if the interview is like pulling teeth, if things don't go exactly how you think they are, it's always good to just have things that are questions that basically you could ask anybody. And there's like a whole list of these, these are things like, where did you get your name? I mean, these are kind of like lame ones, like tell me about your name or tell me about your number. They're a little lame, but like standard things like that are okay. Especially if that person has like a really interesting name that you're like, I honestly don't know. This is a weird reference I don't get. But there's a whole list that if I get my shit together, I could share in the chat at some point. But it's in another slide, so I'll find it later. But yeah, so think about those questions for your back pocket, and then think about specific questions, obviously, for like the person that you want to interview, and have a couple of those ready to go. With the caveat, I'm going to say that like obviously you never know how an interview is going to go, so things can change in the moment. It's really important to be adaptable and to actually listen as they're talking. But it's good to go into an interview with some specific questions in mind already. And you can sometimes build on a theme. One of the interviews we'll watch in a little bit from Death Nella has a really great through line theme that she identified for this skater. And even though she kind of had to adjust a little bit what she was asking specifically, they all kind of fell under this theme umbrella, and it made for a really nice package. So if there's something about that person and their story or that game itself that kind of create a series of questions you can ask, great. Obviously, basic stuff like memorize the event specifics so that once you go live, you've already practiced saying, hello and welcome to the WFTDA D1 tournament in whatever town, like the whole line. You want to practice that over and over again so it is just default and you don't have to stop and think about it. You're not tripping over it. Where are you? What's happening? What is the name of the thing? Who's the host? League, all of that good stuff is stuff you want to make sure that you're memorized. Check yourself out before you go on camera. We'll see a couple of fun examples of this where I minorly messed this up, and it's not the end of the world, but like, check to make sure your fly is up. Take your phone out of your back pocket, take your lanyard off, check your hair, anything else you got to do. so that you can feel comfortable being on camera and don't have to think about it once you actually go live. So yeah, just check yourself out. I always like to make friends with the camera person. I mean, tech folks are the ones who are there making you look and sound good. So you don't have to be creepy and weird and go out of your way to try to be like extra buddy and intimate with them, because that would be strange. But introduce yourself to the camera person. Make sure they know your name. Make sure you know their name. Make sure you know what specific hand signals they use to cue going in, and what to expect in terms of, you know, are you going to be just staring at them waiting for them to give you a hand signal? Is something else going to happen? Have that conversation beforehand so that you know what to expect, but also so that you know the human behind the camera that you are working in front of. And then you will likely work with that same person several times throughout the tournament, so nice to continue that relationship. Excuse me. I should not have had my little fizzy drink before this. That was a bad move. Don't drink fizzy drinks before you go on camera. That's also a really good note. Other side note that I learned in theater, try to avoid things like chocolate and dairy before you have to talk on the mic. Those produce phlegm and make things harder on you. So yeah, those are good no-nos to avoid. I also like to warm up beforehand, like a skater would, but more specific. These are like those great theater warm-ups where you stretch out your face, warm up your lips, do tongue twisters. I actually do some like body work too, because if I'm going to be on camera, I want to look natural and relaxed when I'm on camera. So if I'm all jacked up and tight and awkward, that's not going to be great. So light stretching is great. Do it throughout the day, especially at a tournament where you're stuck sitting around a lot. Don't forget to do that. And then obviously, once you are getting ready to go, you want to check in with the interview subject that you have. So you've got like sometimes as short as like 60 seconds before you're going to go on camera, once you've got your interview person with you. Sometimes you have several long, interminable moments because of whatever delay is happening on the back end. Take advantage of whatever time you do have to, again, introduce yourself. Don't assume that they know who you are. We're announcers. Sometimes they do, and that's great. Sometimes they don't, whatever. But introduce yourself, give them your name, make sure that you are 100% solid on the pronunciation of their name. That's a good time to ask them if you haven't already learned that in advance. I would say don't use this moment to ask them their pronouns. That should be in the sports information book, and or you can ask bench coaches beforehand and make sure you've got those solid. Then you want to go over, I try to give people a quick overview of what I'm actually about to ask them. These aren't meant to be gotcha interviews. We're not trying to catch derby players out on anything. We want to give them a hot second to actually think about what do I want to say here, so that we're not totally putting them on the spot once they're on camera. So I'll give them a sense of, these are the things that I'd like to talk about. These are kind of the, not necessarily the specific questions, but the kind of like topics, themes, whatever. Do you have any questions? Is there anything you want me to for sure ask you about that you want to talk on camera? Most of the time they'll be like, but sometimes you'll get something really great out of someone that you hadn't thought of or couldn't have known about. In the instance of, I interviewed Scald Eagle after she got married to Lady Trample, and I didn't know if she wanted to talk about that on camera. I mean, like, Scald's really forthcoming, but just never assume what someone's comfort level is talking about something to do with their personal life. So I just asked, I was like, hey, is that something you want to talk about? I know a lot of people are really interested and they're talking about it online. Everybody's really excited. And she was like, yeah, of course, that's fine. But this is a good chance to just do those check-ins about anything that you're unsure about. And you want to be like, I think this is a really great story, but it's totally okay if you need to say no. Because one of the tips I gave later is like, generally you should avoid the personal stuff. We're not here to talk about people's personal lives. They're not professional athletes. They're regular folks. So that's generally stuff you want to avoid, but there are exceptions. You just have to ask in advance. The other final thing I like to note at that point, if someone is not super experienced with interviews, is to give them the basic, here's where I need you to stand. Here's where I want you to look, mostly at me. You can start looking into the camera when I'm doing the intro, but then I want us to have a conversation. So I want the skater to actually just look at me. Tends to make them less nervous too, because they're not worried about a camera. They're just talking to another human being. But I kind of tell them to like, keep yourself open to the camera and then just turn your head to me and plant your damn toe stop. If they don't plant a toe stop, skaters will roll the hell out of shot if you let them. They will just slowly roll backwards. And if at some point in the middle of the interview they do bring the toe stop off and stop rolling, you might literally have to take a few steps to adjust. The camera will usually follow you. Once in a blue moon, I've had to like very gently just reach out and like tap someone on the back to stop them from just leaving frame entirely. But I like to try to avoid having to make physical contact without them giving consent. So just tell them to put one toe stop down and just plant themselves. That is a hugely, surprisingly important note to give to people. All right, I'm gonna pause again here. Are there any questions or notes or things you think I missed? Because it's entirely possible.
I always just tell people, like, don't take the microphone. I will hold the mic for you. That's not something we need to pass back and forth.
Yes, 100% that. And I think I have that as a note in the next section, but you can also tell people that in advance. Like, don't worry about the mic. I will take care of it for you. You just be you. Yeah, that's a great point.
So I've got a question for you. What is your favorite vocal warm-up? Like, you know, if it's something sing-songing embarrassing, all the better. Please do it for us.
It's like the Human Torch was denied a bank loan. No, geez. My go-to is well, the face warp up. I will fully do like the lion face, lemon face thing, where you just like, because that actually is really helpful. A favorite vocal warm-up though, you put me on the spot. I think I'm a fan of Box of Biscuits.
Box of biscuits?
Yeah, and there's hand motions that I learned in my theater class. I think we made them up. It's a box of biscuits, a box of mixed biscuits, and a biscuit mixer. So you got to do all the things. But I like that one for some reason. There's a whole bunch of them I could go through. Yeah, the sing-songy ones I usually save for when I'm actually singing warm-ups. These I like to just do the enunciation ones.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sing on this call. Sorry.
All right, I had to try.
Yeah, no, good effort. Any other questions? Or
Yeah, I have a question about sort of how much do you think about who the intended audience is for an interview? I mean, I guess if you're at, like, is it like, are you concerned about, if you're doing champs or whatever, is it the in-house, is it the broadcast, or who you're looking to talk to? That's something that I worry about when I have to.
Clarify for me, what do you mean if it's the broadcaster in-house?
Well, I don't know. I just like the interviews that I do are like Minnesota roller derby. We do a halftime, not after the game, but like house or home league games. And so we're always I'm doing house and broadcast at the same time when I'm doing it. And the point of it from we just started doing them halfway through this last season, and I'm just making shit up. Like I've never given it as much thought as this. So thank you. This is very, very helpful.
Good.
But
so
I mean, kind of the question is like, for me, the goal of it, according to MNRD, the reason we instituted these is to increase fan engagement. Like we wanted to entertain the fans in the building is what I was supposed to be doing. But I also had an eye to, because we're also broadcasting it, which is a whole pain in my ass. But anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good question and a really good distinction. Depending on who is this being broadcast to will change kind of how you do a thing, right? So we also do these post-game interviews at our home games, and Rich has sort of pioneered that for us with a couple of other in-house announcers, because we are very fortunate that we have a really awesome broadcast setup for our home teams. So we have broadcast, we have house, and then we have these post-game interviews. And in those cases, like those are going onto YouTube to the general public, and they're also being broadcast on a Wisconsin television station. So they're just going out to the world. So, you know, the broadcasts in those cases are much more like Derby 101, because the people who tend to randomly see it on TV don't know Derby, right? So we approach the post game in much the same way, where it's kind of a mix there of like people who know our league, who know these teams, who are going to be watching them, stuff that they might be really interested in that's a little more like inside baseball, like tactics and training or whatever, but always making sure, and I don't know if it's intentional, Rich, but I feel like we also do a lot of just like, you know, who are you as a person? Like, what was really fun? What did you like about this team? How did you get into Derby? Some of those more like general human interest kind of things. Because again, like it's just going out into the world, and we want people to take notice and be like, oh, these are like my neighbors and stuff, and they play this really kick-ass sport. And they're also really smart about like the different strategies and things like that as well. So kind of bringing people on a very short journey in an interview in that case. I've not done one where it's only going to in-house. So like over the PA too, because I can't even imagine how that would work. So I can't speak to that, but I think those would be like very basic, big, like 1 or 2 questions. So most of what I've done has been at like these tournaments, and these, you know, the WFTDA broadcasts are going to people who paid for a WFTDA ticket, right? Who paid to see this tournament. So not so much the Derby 101. And this is where things like Derby Twitter is really handy. And Derby Twitter is happily not a cesspool like many things on Derby Facebook are. People have really interesting conversations there. So it's a great hashtag to follow just to see, like, was there a standout moment that people are losing their minds over? Was there a question about strategy that people were digging into? Is there some through line about this team or this person and their trajectory that people are really interested in and talking about? I get a lot of great questions literally by just following that hashtag and keeping an eye on those conversations. And then just in-house too, like, again, talking to other announcers about what they're seeing, paying attention to the tournament and what's happening generally, trying to watch as many games as possible, just to think about, like, what are people seeing on the broadcast? What are they gonna wanna know about? And fortunately, all of us are Derby fans, so we have an insight into that. Like, what would you wanna know about? And that's something to really, you know, think about. Like, I think some of the interviews that are, I'm not gonna call them terrible, but they're just not interesting, is where you just ask these very, very generic questions, and it's clear that, like, there's not really conversation happening. It's not really about what's going on in that moment. And I get that, because it's like if someone gets thrown in and they're scared and they don't know what they're doing, it's like, but yeah, just always really important to think about, like, who is your audience? What do they want? What's going to be really interesting to people? And also, like, what's going to be interesting for the person that you're interviewing to talk about? What are they going to want to care to talk about? And trying to make them feel good and look good on camera as well. So yeah, great question. That's a whole good section of things to talk about there. So thank you for that. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and move on, because that was a lot for this one. If you think about other things, let me know. All right, zooming back out. We're going live. All right, so the breathe, you've got this. Speak slowly and clearly. As you may notice on this call, I am very prone to speaking quickly. And I have to really work hard to slow down and speak in a way that people can hear every word that is coming out of my mouth. This is something that I trained really hard in theater in particular, because it's, again, just an old bad habit of mine. And the best advice I got was, over exaggerate how slowly you think you need to speak. And in real life, it'll be perfect. You will think you sound in your head slow and terrible and awful, and almost always in real life, it will sound perfect. If you are someone who struggles more on the opposite end, with too many pauses, with ums and ahs, this is also it's almost the same technique. It's speaking in a regular, even pace so that you have time to think about every single word that's going to come out of your mouth. And if you're thinking about every word that's going to come out of your mouth, as opposed to speeding through it and feeling like you have to fill space, you're going to be less likely to use ums and ahs and you knows or whatever your tick is. Another way to learn about that is to watch footage of yourself and be merciless. Pick out every like that you say, every and ah, tally it, and then you will become hyper aware of that as a tick. So there are a lot of different techniques to deal with that, and I would encourage looking them up, because a lot more professional trained folks than I have, you know, written things or created workshops about how to sort of train those vocal tics out. But the basics two-step thing is just be aware in the first place, which means you have to watch footage of yourself, and then just to do this thing where you're speaking in a way where you're literally thinking about every word that's coming out of your mouth. So it's going to be a little bit slower maybe than you're used to in my case, or just in a weird, even way. And once you get really good at that, you can get back into conversation mode. Like, it doesn't have to be robotic and like monotone. You still want to be human with people. You just have to kind of get this to stop panicking. We talked about microphone technique already a little bit, but that's something that's good to practice too. Take a moment with the microphone, because all of them are a little bit different. And you can, again, check in with your camera person and be like, does this sound good? Is this too close? Is this all right? Am I projecting in a way that makes sense? And then you have to try, once you go live, not to start shouting louder than you were speaking when you were sound testing, because I have definitely done that. I'm like, yeah, I've got a perfect level. This is great. And then we come on, I'm like, hello! And it just, So practice your microphone technique and don't ever hand it to the other person, right? So we already talked about that. Here's a big one, active listening and adaptation. You may have all those questions that you want to ask, but it's like improv comedy, if you know anything about it. Improv comedy is about, you may have this great idea in your head and you think it's the funniest joke in the world, but your scene partner has done something where it would make no sense for you to wedge this joke in, no matter how brilliant you think it is. Your job is to adapt and actually listen to what they're doing and go along with that and start to build off of that. It's your same job as an interviewer. So you have the setup question to get things going, and you may have to use those other questions because maybe that person isn't offering you a lot, but oftentimes while people are answering you, they're gonna say something that deserves a follow-up question. So you wanna follow them on that journey. And you can keep in mind that you've got a theme that you wanna stick to, or if they start wandering off in a direction and you have to rein them in, or maybe you have to prompt them a little bit more, those things are all legit. But you don't wanna just be this wall between you and the other person where you're like, these are the questions I have to ask and I have to get through them all, no matter what. You wanna actually have a conversation with someone. And I think that's what makes for the best interviews, is someone who has all this prep work, has all this planning, has really practiced what they do, but then they're there in that moment, present with that person and listening to what they say and picking out those little moments that are like, that's the thing I want to follow up on because that's the juicy nugget that I need to think about or know about. And that's going to make a really great interview. What to do with your body. That's another good one to know about. There's some really great workshops out there and tips and tricks for this for anytime you're on camera. One of the biggest things that we run into, all of us have different tics. We're like, we might rock when we stand, we might fidget. I touch my face a lot when I'm doing stuff, especially when I'm sitting. Happily, that's not an issue when I'm holding a microphone. Like I just do this a lot, like it's weird. So again, watch footage, see what your tics are. But what you really want to do is as soon as you find, you're going to have a countdown into going live, right? So you're going to have at least like 10 seconds or something like that to just stare into the camera and stand where you are. So you find your spot, you take those 10 seconds, however long you have, and really let yourself root into the ground. Make sure that your knees aren't locked, right? You've got like a little bend in the knees. You're in a comfortable position where you can stand. And I like to stagger my feet slightly so that they're not right next to each other, right? So whichever way makes sense to you, just stagger them a little bit because that will tend to prevent you from rocking, even if you don't realize you're doing it. You wanna be just steady, right? And then it's making sure that your body and chest is open to the camera and maybe cheated slightly. If you haven't heard that term, cheating is just basically like when you're on stage and I'm facing this other person, but you're still really kind of facing the audience. You just sort of turning keeping your legs and stuff like face forward, and then you just turn your upper body a little bit in. And then I'm just gonna turn my head in just a little bit so I can actually like look at the person and make eye contact with them, but I'm not standing in total 90-degree profile to the camera at that point. I have definitely messed this up a few times and I always see it and I'm like, cool, now we're just looking at my butt and like half my face. And that's not great. So it's important to, keep yourself open to the camera and then just sort of turn your upper body to have that conversation like this. And again, it's going to help you just stay rooted in place as opposed to having to take steps around. So just take those 10 seconds to just like take a breath, feel the earth beneath you, make sure your feet are placed where you want them, find a comfortable spot, relax into it and go. Sticky situations and how to clean them up. So a few things, I've been really fortunate in most of the interviews I've done. I've never had something where it was like, oh God, you just said something and there's no going back. I think someone swore once and they were like, oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, maybe we're not supposed to swear on the WFTDA, but it was like a shit. So we just sort of laughed and kept going. It is what it is. But the stuff that I've seen where it's like, again, it's pretty rare. I think most people are pretty good in Derby, and it's not like we have super strict standards for this stuff. People can talk about whatever. But if something feels awkward or someone says something that's like really offensive, or you mess up, for instance, like if you use the wrong pronouns for someone or you just feel like you've stepped in something, the best bet is to not make it into a scene, right? So you might have to just say, I'm sorry, correct yourself, and then move on with the conversation. If the other person does something, you can even interject and say, I'm sorry, it's this. And then you were saying, please go on. So really direct, simple, short corrections and recorrections or redirections of the conversation are your best bet, which can be sort of terrifying. Your heart might start to race, but you don't want to turn it into a big thing on camera and turn it into an argument or turn it into like tons of dead space, right? So again, the best bet is just like really quick, surgically precise, correction, apology, move on. And then, yeah, just remember, skaters are people. You're also people. No skater up to Scald Eagle, Bonnie Thunders, whatever. Like some of them might have some tude or some ego. You can handle all of them. You are also a vital part of roller derby, and you are all humans who are doing a thing that you're paying there to be for. And I'm like, even pro athletes and stuff, I'm like, yeah, you're still a human being. That's the important thing to remember. They still take a shit before the game, like we're all just regular folks. So whatever you got to do to remind yourself, like, all of us have our moments where we're prone to being like, oh my God, it's so-and-so. And it's great to be excited about meeting people. But yeah, ultimately remember that they are humans who might have their own insecurities about being on camera. And we're there to help them out. So a couple of things. Here's this huge list of questions. These are sort of like the standard ones. And like I said, I'm going to just put these in, I'm going to put these maybe in a post in the Facebook page to share. I could put them in the chat, but that's going to be like a whole thing. If people want these as an example, I'll put them in a place that is publicly accessible on the Facebook event for this thing, and you can grab them if you want to. So these were some of the go-to questions we talked about. I'm not going to go over them all right now and just read this to you because that would be boring as hell. Some things not to ask, and my Letterkenny reference here for you. That's a hard no. Don't ask about injuries unless that person has specifically said, I would like to talk about my injury. No body commentary, right? And this is true of just announcing in general when we're talking about people on the track. We don't make comments about people's body size or what it can do. If they say something about it, that's fine. They can say something about it. Generally, I don't then add anything to it. I'm just like, yay, okay, cool. And then I move on to something else. The personal details, the asterisk about it, we talked about that before. Don't blindside someone by asking about something that's not derby related, unless beforehand you've cleared it with them as like, this is relevant. So like Lady Trample and Scald Eagle, two huge roller derby names, getting married in like a roller derby name deciding game, like that's still pretty relevant. And I still asked about it. And obviously nothing invasive or creepy. Don't ask to touch them in any way. Don't express any like, I had such a crush on you, or the closest I ever came, and I feel a little bit bad about it, was commenting on Lacey Knight's shoulders. But I didn't say anything sexual about them. I just said that they were like my role models, that I wanted to have shoulders like that. So I think most people are pretty good about this, but I always want to make sure to put it in as a statement, like, that's not what we're there for. We don't want to make people feel uncomfortable on camera. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break for any questions before I move into some of these quick examples here, and hopefully these videos work. But any questions or comments about everything I just went over?
I have a quick one, Abby. With when you're interviewing, and I've seen this go a couple of different ways. You're holding the mic, you're passing the mic back and forth between the two of you. Where are you directing your attention when? Are you asking the question to the camera, or asking the question to the person? When do you direct attention to the camera? When do you direct it to the person? What's your guideline on that?
Yeah, good question. My guideline is what I have learned from most TV professionals in general, and I've seen it done the opposite way of what I'm about to tell you, and I don't like it, and I don't think it works. I think you should look into the camera when you're giving the introduction. You should spend the entire interview looking only at the interview subject, unless there's something you're like literally like, ah ha ha ha, and blah, 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 that's like a specific thing out to the audience. But if you're talking, like if you're just having a conversation with someone, you should always keep it on them. And then you only turn back to the camera then when you're doing the outro at the end. And that's it. So it's a nice little sandwich. Camera, beginning and end. During the actual interview, when you're talking to the person, just look at them. And it's the same advice I give to the skater as well. Like, you can look into the camera at the beginning and the end, like to connect with the audience. But when we're actually having the interview conversation, just look at me. It looks a lot more natural. And it's a lot, yeah, it looks weird to me when people are like, I'm gonna ask you a question and I'm not gonna look at you while you give me an answer, right? That's no good. So that's pretty standard practice as far as I've seen it, and I just think it looks a lot better.
Yeah, all right.
Bobby.
What do you do if there's a tremendous height differential between you and the person that you're going to be interviewing?
So there's always I mean, people are on skates, so that tends to really throw things off, right? The first thing you do is make sure you work with your camera person on where you're standing, because they're going to tell you like where they want you so that they can have both of you in frame. So if there's a really big height differential, they'll often have you move further back so they can kind of cheat that on the camera. For you yourself, boy, I am an average height person. So I tend to be okay with tall or short. I can adapt pretty easily either way. It's not, I don't have the personal experience to really speak to if there's like a huge difference and you have to like stand on your tiptoes to hold a microphone up to someone. I've never had to do that. You do have to adjust like a little bit though. Like if someone is much taller than me, you know, it's just like, I'm cheating. I'm gonna not hold the mic in my cross hand. I'm gonna hold it into the one closer to them, so I'm not crossbody and then like in front of my face, right? So I'll try to hold it here, 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 and that's just generally good practice, regardless of how high their height. And yeah, you just have to adapt. Like, yeah, I might have to hold my hand up a little bit more. Might have to hold it down a little bit more. That's fine. And you talk to them like you would. You make eye contact, and you don't comment on the height difference because that is also commenting on body size, right? So. Yeah, if anybody has any more specific experience with like huge height differentials, I'm all here for you to speak up on that. But it's I've been able to make adjustments, and I'm pretty average height, so I can't really speak to the big disparities. Anything else?
So I guess to kind of build on something you just said in that that last question, holding your mic either to like, so when you're facing the camera, you're cheating out a bit. Do you tend to prefer holding the mic to the inside so it's between you and your interviewee, or do you prefer to do the crossbody? Do you feel like there's not much difference between it so long as there's not that height differential?
Yeah, I feel like that's one of those things. There's not a real hard and fast rule. It sort of depends on your comfort and what ends up looking good on camera. And I know I tend to defer to my right hand because I am right dominant. I've been trying to untrain that though, because I do think it looks better to have the mic in the hand that's closer, because you're doing less reaching that way generally, and you don't risk like this weird awkward across your body, rumpling your shirt, whatever might happen from that. So if you can remember to just always have it in the hand that's closest to the person, I think that's a good best practice, but it's not the end of the world if you don't, right? So just kind of figure out what's comfortable for you. That would be my advice on that anyway.
Just a quick follow-up on that. More of a comment than a question. But this came up at Battle of the All-Stars. I had a interviewee who had hearing loss in one ear. Thankfully, we identified it because I normally interview on the right side, and we would have stood that way. And we realized that I think it was her right ear was bad. So just something to check if they have a side they strongly prefer for whatever reason, but including hearing loss.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That's something I haven't personally encountered yet, but those little things that you don't necessarily think about unless you are a person with hearing loss. So often skaters will just come and stand on the side that they're comfortable. I feel like most of my interviews, people end up being on my left for some reason, and I don't know why that is. I don't think I force them to be there. But yeah, that's great. Hopefully, I think most time people will tell you like, hey, you know, like this is a thing, so can I be over here? And you're like, cool, and you adapt. If you know about it in advance, like you can check in with that person and get it set up that way too. But yeah, that's a great note. Hadn't even thought of that. If someone's just like, I have a better side, you're like, fuck you, you're standing here, I don't care. No. All right, so this is the first time I've tried to embed videos and things. I'm hoping this works. And these are full game files, but I put the code in for like at the interview point. So we're gonna just real quick visit this interview. Is this coming through for everybody? It's just spinning right now. Oh gosh. Thumbs up, you can see this? See it?
I can't hear it though.
Oh no. Hold on. You can't hear it? Oh, son of a bitch. That ruins the entire point of it. All right. That's good to know. I have not actually tried to run one of these over it. So, well, then I will just I'm going to play it on mute. So we're going to watch some body language. So this was an interview where beforehand.
There's a way to fix this, Abby.
What
sorry.
is it?
When you share, there's a button in the lower left corner that you click that says share original sound, or share sound from the screen that you're sharing. If you're sharing your screen, right? That's what's happening, right?
Yes, I am sharing my screen. I have the stop share button. I have a pause share.
Okay. What you have to do is you have to unshare.
Okay.
And when you start sharing again, then there's the button. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Let's see if we can do this together. Thank you for your patience.
See if we can do this together. Yeah. Is it there?
Share computer sound. There it is. Okay.
Yes, that's it. That's it. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
I learned that the hard way too, believe me.
Thank you. All right. Are you seeing the video footage again? All right. I'm going to start it. I'm going to
really appreciate is watching you sort of just orchestrate your pack, be there for them, be very calm.
Okay, before we keep going though, what I'm going to ask you to do is enjoy this interview, but make any notes about like things that are maybe against what I've just told you in terms of advice, things that were good that you enjoyed, and then I'll give you a little background on like how this interview happened as well.
But focused and very aggressive at the same time. And it's a sort of an element in Derby that sometimes gets overlooked for the shiny jammers, right? But I want you to talk a little bit first about that pivot role and how integral that is to keeping things together on the track and playing consistently and good teamwork, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, the pivot role is one that I really love playing, and in my opinion, we should absolutely get the jammer out, my jammer out, by playing really good defense and good physical offense. So if we don't get the jammer out that way, that is not okay. And then we need to get her out as soon as possible. And it's basically either get her the best course out of there with physical offense or get the star moving as fast as possible. I actually came into the sport 14 years ago as a jammer, and that was my love. I loved jamming. But then one day, a funny thing occurred to me that the reason I was out there blocking was to keep jammers from scoring. And then I became a great blocker. And so from that point on, I've done the blocking job, and I really love it. It's hard to get a jammer position on the Texies because it's a really aggressive jammer lineup. So being a pivot is something that I've really fallen into.
Well, it shows that you love it. I want to talk a little bit too now. So Texas, a very consistent present at championships for a long time. The last time you won was Dust Devil, 2006, sorry. But you're here every time, putting in a really good game, and I feel like we watch you guys sort of get better and better throughout the season. You come to champs and you bring it. So what have you been working on this year? Because the game has changed a lot. The lineups of like who the usual suspects are playing has changed. You know, the competition is very different. So what do you guys think about coming into this and approaching it as long-time champs contenders, but how different things are now?
Yeah. Well, you know, we just approach it like any other tournament, to be quite honest. Like, we prepare for this starting off at the beginning of the season, which for us starts in about March. And so we know that it's going to be a long journey, a long route to champs, especially with whichever seed we happen to be in at the, or not seed, but rankings we happen to be in at the time. And so we do kind of like, other teams oscillate a lot, but we tend to stay around 5 or 6 over the last couple of seasons. We play a lot of good teams. We play some of the best teams in the sport during the pre-tournament season. And then when we get to the tournament season, you know, we just, we play for the best, we play for the W, we play, you know, to just really bring the best game as possible to our opponent, because we know that that's what they're doing. If you're asking how it is to always make it so close and not win. So like last year, we lost to Rose by, I think, maybe like 14 points.
It was a great game.
So we didn't move forward, and they of course did. And I think the final game last year, the second team came in like maybe 20 points behind Rose. So, you know, it's the way that our game works, we're not like baseball where we have 7 games and then we get to see who won, you know? So we know that going in for games. And, you know, perhaps my team needs to be a little bit better getting that W when it counts. counts, and maybe that's something that the team's going to work towards, definitely in seasons to come. We're definitely looking for a W tomorrow night against Gotham. We love playing Gotham. They're a great team. Their team has changed a lot since the last time that we played them, but they're an absolutely great strategic team, but we are too. Texas is so strategy smart. I was just sitting on the bench next to OJ, and OJ just was like, oh, hey, letting you know their jammer got switched out, so she can't go back in for 2, and just keep an eye on that. And I play with some of the best athletes in the sport, so I feel really confident going out there in our game tomorrow against Gotham. And it used to be a couple of years ago, you'd go and play Gotham and people would be like, good luck, like as in you're not going to win.
Although, pause, a couple of years ago, you guys came really close.
Well, we did, and at certain points in the game, we were winning. I was like, man, why can't this be a 43-minute game? That'd be great. But, unfortunately for me, winning is not everything. Like, I used to cry really bad when we'd lose and, try to win dance parties. But now I really do just love stepping on the track and playing the best game that I can.
That's a fantastic answer. And so I have one final question for you.
Final question.
So I hear that there's some controversy.
Okay.
It's a controversial topic.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce your real name?
My real name. Well, my real name is spelled Nadia Keen.
Yep.
But it's Nadia Kane. And if you want to be really good friends with me, when I introduce myself, put that in your other hand. Okay. And now let's go. Hi, tell me your name. Hi.
Oh, I'm Hammer Abby.
Oh, hi, I'm Nadia. You say not Nadia? Okay, ready?
It's not Nadia?
No, it's Nadia. Like I said, Nadia.
Oh, that's weird. You just told me that, but I'm just going to keep saying Nadia.
It's okay.
Just,
It
okay.
happens
All the time? All
right. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Smarty.
Okay.
Congratulations again on the win today. Kill it against Gotham tomorrow. I hope you have a great weekend overall.
Okay, great. And thank you for your great yourself. You're awesome.
I'll just give her the microphone for that part especially. Thanks very much. Stick around. There's more great action to come. Don't go anywhere.
I swear I didn't include this one just because it was Smarty Pants saying nice things about me. So, other than my amazing missing tooth, what are some things you noticed about that you thought were good, or things you have questions about, or things that you're like, meh, I'll take it all?
This skater could be, Smarty Pants could be an announcer. She's really articulate, and a Smarty Pants. That's my thought. It's a good interview.
Yeah, fair. Smarty Pants, to be fair, was always a very an easy interview, almost too talkative.
Okay.
I was never given any cut it, because it's like, if she's saying interesting things and it's a good conversation, we're just gonna go with it. But then always making sure that if she gives really long answers, I probably could have asked even one fewer question in that interview, I would say, just to keep it a little tighter. But yeah, she's very, very well spoken. Anything else?
Abby, you emote a lot facially, which is great. It makes it more of a natural interview. I'm always in the limited on-camera interviews that I've done, I'm always not sure how much emoting is. At what point it looks goofy for me, and at what point I'm just being too stoic. How do you find a balance?
Great question. I'd like to say that there was a lot of internal control on that, but I'm a naturally very emotive person. The thing that I've learned over time, and it helps because you're having to pass a microphone back and forth, is to I learned from radio is to not make noises of agreement, not stuff like that. Which for sure you can't do on camera, but it won't really pick you up, but it kind of would. So just don't. But I do believe in giving the person who's speaking to you some visual feedback so that they know you're actually engaging with what they're saying. Now, mine's probably a little bit over the top, but I think it's because it's just me. People are like, it's just Hammer. That's just how she is, right? I don't think it's too much. You could definitely go overboard. But I think, just the whole active listening thing. What would you do if you were having a conversation with someone and the only way you could give them feedback was just visually? So occasional nods, little facial expressions. If you're not a super emotive person, that's fine. Just I would just say, don't shut yourself down. Don't try to be stoic. I don't think that's helpful in these. I think these are supposed to be very personable. All the great sideline interviews I've ever seen, the person was very engaged. The interview was very engaged with the person they were talking to, and have facial expressions. So I would say don't overthink it too much. Just try to be yourself and natural and having a conversation, and watch it back and you're like, boy, I'm not doing anything at all then you can try to work on that. If you think you look goofy, I would ask other people for their input, because you may not actually look that goofy. We're all hypercritical of ourselves and what we look like on camera, but I don't think I've ever seen someone who was like, except maybe Norm. Like Norm, I would not give a sideline interview, but like Norm, not Norm, because he's ridiculous and that's his whole like shtick. But other than that, I think everybody's probably just fine.
I saw that you were working without any sort of notes, that you just had your hands free, except for you had one hand on the microphone, you had the other hand free. Do you ever have to work with notes? And when you do have to work with notes, how does that change the nature of the interview, if at all? I
have never worked with notes when I do interviews. I find them restrictive, and like they would just, I don't want that in my hands. I don't want to be thinking about it. It's like memorizing a script. If you've really memorized like the key questions you want to ask, and then you're actively engaged in the conversation because it's improv, you shouldn't need the notes. If you really struggle with memorizing, like, and you want to have a couple of, well, here's the thing, in an interview like this, you shouldn't be rattling off a bunch of stats anyway. You might have like one big factoid or two big factoids that are sort of more storyline focused, like, you know, your team went to tournaments this many times. Like in this one, I was like, you know, I didn't say Texas has been at every champs since X year. I was like, off the top of my head, like, I do know that Texas has been at like most champs, so I can say that. And I want to talk about this as like, they are frequently not awesome in the preseason, and then they get better and better, and they show up at champs and they sort of do really, really well. And that was a thing that Texas was known for a long time. So speaking more broadly like that in terms of storyline and theme keeps you from having to memorize some of those really hard and fast stats. And you don't want to fill, again, these are supposed to be personable human interest interviews more than anything, I think. So you don't really need to dig into those stats that you might need to take notes for. So yeah, I don't use notes. I just try to have a good sense of what I want to talk about beforehand, and then, you know, be practiced and as like calm and in the moment as I can, so that my brain doesn't just shut off. Yeah, good question though.
When you have like that was a fun little back and forth where you acted like you were having a conversation about her name. In that kind of scenario, is that something you want to check with them before you dox their name?
Yes. So the background on that is really important. Smarty actually wanted to have that conversation. I didn't pitch it. I didn't know anything about it. I honestly don't remember how it came up. Other than that, she brought it up and said, "Hey, can we do this thing at the end where we play act meeting and I tell you how to pronounce my name, because this has been this like running joke with people." And I was like, sure, why not? So it's not something I would ever propose. I would never use someone's real name in an interview for Derby. But because she specifically prompted that and I knew it was coming and she had asked that to be like the final thing, I was like, that sounds delightful. Let's do it. So that's how that came about.
Yeah, it was a fun little back and forth, but I was just wondering about that.
Yeah. Otherwise, no, I would never offer the personal information on an interview like that.
Ask them their address and.
Yeah, could you just put that? I mean, and you know, it's Smarty, and I think because she has like also a business entity version of herself, and like people are more familiar with her name. I don't, you know, if someone was offering their real name and I was like maybe concerned that they didn't know the implications, I might have a conversation with them about it. But yeah, in this case, she was very specific about wanting to do that.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Anything else?
I just wanted to know about the crossbody microphone thing that you were doing. I was thinking I wouldn't like that, but I ended up really liking it because I thought it allowed your two bodies to be closer together. Because if you're doing it where like they're over there and you're here, like what are you really doing with your arm, you know? Like the way you reach across, like look natural, but you were able to keep your body open to the camera really well. So like just seeing that sort of convinced me that might be a better way to go sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it's just a matter of like if you're really comfortable in how your body is positioned and you know that you can do that. I feel like I pull it off sometimes and other times I don't. But it kind of just depends on your level of comfort, what's happening in the moment, where the other skater is. So I think either have pluses and minuses. I do think I tend to default to across the body. And I know sometimes it's pulled me like this is the only downside. So you just have to be really aware that you don't turn profile. But I appreciate that. yeah, that's, I guess I'm walking back slightly more my advice before. They're like, never do that. Like, I think it's fine sometimes. It's just sort of the other factors play into it, like whether or not it looks good or not. So, you know, play around with it, review footage, try it out. Cool. I want to actually skip because we're going longer than I expected to, and I apologize. No, I do want to go to the next one. I'm going to have to skip Nella's, unfortunately, but I'm going to send it to you all because it's a really great interview, and I want you all to watch it at some point if you get a chance. I think I stopped sharing, and now you don't have audio though. So give me 1 second. Actually, you know what? I don't need the audio on this one. So the only thing I want to point out on this, because I'm not going to go through I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing. There is one thing in this interview that I want you to see visually and point out that I missed. You should be able to see it right now. Nate, what is it?
Your phone is in your pocket.
Yep. So, you know, not the end of the world by any means, but I was kicking myself when I went back and watched this, and I was like, dude, just, yeah, you don't need the bulky phone in your pocket. So what I usually do is I empty like everything. Like if you have a wallet in your pocket, you have phone, you have keys, the lanyard that you usually wear around your neck at like a tournament or a game, make sure you take all of that stuff off, put it in a little pile right by the camera, and clean yourself up. And I just totally forgot to do it. So again, not a huge thing, but like a small one I wanted to point out that like, yep, I fucked that up.
And
there's a note.
And especially with a well-tailored outfit like that.
Yeah, it's very obvious. And here too,
and you look great. You look great.
Thank you.
Aside from that huge faux pas.
Right. That huge unforgivable sin. The other thing that's happening right here is I am in profile to the camera. It's really tricky when you're interviewing more than one person and you have to kind of reach across that second person. So this is another asterisk kind of exception where I don't think it's the end of the world because I had to get over to KWOO and I just don't have go gadget arms. So as long as you're at least in 90 profile and you're not further than that with your back to the camera, I think that's fine. I think I could have done a slightly better job of still keeping myself a little bit open. And in this case, switching the mic to the other hand and reaching it across go to get to KWOO might have been better because it would have left my body open and then I'd be reaching over and then I could just switch it back at the end. Things you don't necessarily think about in the moment, but that's why footage review is really handy because you can see that. And it feels weird to be like gaming out the strategy of how to hold the mic, but it really does make a difference for what people are seeing, how you look, how you feel in the moment, all of that. So there's some various good examples in this one. This is where we got the Cornfed Midwest Sticky Derby and KWOO lightly trash talking the people who had discounted our tribal as a competitor, which I did not prompt and she just did, and I didn't feed into it, but it was great. It was, made for great watching. So, okay. We will get things. We're coming into the end here, and I appreciate you all so much for sticking with me through this. I'm gonna have to do this real quick. No! Oh, everything is complicated and hard. Okay. So we're gonna come out of that one. In a debrief. Real quick, we already talked about a lot of this, and it's just always watch footage. Footage of yourself. Hard to do sometimes, really, really important to do. Just like we tell skaters, you have to watch yourself to know what you're doing. Take notes about verbal tics, what you're doing with your body, how you thought it went, all the little things, pick them apart. Start to notice themes, trends, make notes for yourself about things that you want to try next time, and really try to focus on those things. And I would say, pick like one, maybe two big things that you want to really try to do each time you do an interview that you want to focus on. Don't, if you're taking notes and you're like, this was terrible and this is bad and I'm not good at this, don't do that in the first place. These are all growing, learning things. You're not terrible. You're trying something that's difficult and weird. But in terms of trying to implement something at the time, like really focus in on like one thing at a time. Don't try to overwhelm yourself with like the 5 things that you want to change and improve at any given time. Just start with the good meat and potato stuff. Work on that one thing for a while until you feel really comfortable about it. Then move on to something else that you want to work on. If you're really great at multitasking, maybe 2 things. but don't overwhelm yourself. But it's important to just sort of like keep at it and pick something really clearly that you want to focus on. Great to ask for feedback from fellow announcers who have lots of great experience to offer, great insight. Some of it is not great, and you can just throw that aside and you don't need it. It's fine. Talk to friends too. So people who watch the feed, that you know and you have a good relationship with, and ask them for their feedback as well. Like constructive criticism is great. I don't really look for it from strangers because I don't know if they're talking out of their ass or they're just trying to be, flip or whatever. Like, talk to people that you actually value the feedback of and take that to heart. I mentioned Derby Twitter again here because Derby Twitter is generally very respectful. You get like one random person who will wander in a tournament and try to spout their mouth off, and like the rest of Derby Twitter will swoop in to put them in their place. And like occasionally stuff happens on there that you'll see that you're like, and they'll call it an announcer and you'll feel really shitty. Like someone will have some crusade that they're on, but like it's generally a very friendly place. Sometimes you get really lovely feedback from people. Sometimes people call out something that you didn't even notice and you're like, oh, cool, that's a really great note. And then just study other people's work, not just roller derby, but other sideline reporting from other sports, and just decide what do you like and what don't you like. Take those notes, take those things, put them into your own pocket and use them yourself. What works and what doesn't is pretty universal between sports, I think. Obviously there's stuff that's unique to roller derby, but just in terms of like, again, the nuts and bolts of how to do the thing and how to ask the questions and how to position yourself, those are all available to study in lots of other realms. Okay, so I think I said most of the things I wanted to say. I just wanted to show you lots of pretty announcer pictures because I miss all of these people. So I just put them all in here. This is the crew from Champs in Montreal last year. And those were our gifts from our tournament co-head announcers. Chloe and Beatrix got us all those hats that said Chatnet Champs on them. It was really lovely. Okay, so I spent a lot of time talking. We'll do a final Q&A here. If you have any questions about anything we've talked about in the course of this, or any thoughts or things you would like to contribute, the floor is open. Or maybe that's it. I nailed it.
No, it was really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, dumb. This might be dumb.
Nothing's dumb.
But like in the last clip where you were when you're interviewing two people, would it ever make sense to do like an announcer sandwich, or would it be too much of this?
Only if you were going for the visual gag, I think.
Okay. Because I was thinking about the reach. You know?
Yeah. No, I see where your head's at, but I think it would be hilarious. So if you want it to be hilarious for some reason, like specifically, go for it. But if you're not aiming for it to be silly, I would not do that.
Okay.
I did 4 once and had 2 on either side.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd say if you have over 2 people, you might put yourself in the middle, especially if it's a huge group, like you have to be in the middle. And
it was chaotic. They kind of took over the
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that'll happen sometimes, whether you choose to or not. Like I've definitely seen interviews where like you start out with like 2 people and then the whole team is so excited they just like pile in behind you and sort of take over. And that's where you just sort of let go and let God, like you usually have 1 or 2 people who are still actually on mic, but you're going to be dealing with all that background noise and all the other shenanigans that are going on. You just roll with the party atmosphere. And that's what you're doing now. It's just kind of how it goes. Yeah, those are all good points.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for joining us. This has been an excellent production. Thank you very much, Hammer Abby, for sharing your skills and helping us all become better and letting us ace our post-game interviews next time we go out there. The AFTDA will make the materials that you have provided available through our website and also through our Facebook page. I'm not the best person in terms of technically how, but in all the materials that you have put here will also make available, like we have done with the prior webinars. Our prior webinars were on production last November and on avoiding stress last January. We're pleased to add this one, and stick around there. Pay attention to the Facebook page of the AFTDA. We're going to have more webinars. Johnny Johnny Pepper is going to be helping us up our ad game, helping us make our sponsors satisfied. And Very Cherry is going to have a nice panel discussion about international travel. And we've got some other topics brewing as well, some really distinguished faculty. Glad to have you, Hammer Abby, and thank you all for joining us. And stay tuned on the AFTDA Facebook page for more webinars in our series.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a real pleasure. Very nice to see everybody's faces, and I hope to get to watch you at roller derby at some point in the not so distant future, God willing. Everybody take care. Thanks so much.
Great to
Thanks,
see you
Rich.
guys. So long.
Thanks,
Bye.
Hammer.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.